That's better. Anyway, let's pray. So, Lord Jesus, on this gorgeous, beautiful evening, I just pray that you will bless what I'm going to share now, and pray it might be both an encouragement and a challenge to each one of us here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. There's always something challenging, I suppose, when someone goes away for a while and then they invite you to look at their holiday photos. And I don't know how you respond, whether there's a bit of you thinks, wow, this is really exciting, or your heart sinks and thinks, oh, do I really have to? Don't worry, you're not going to be subjected to lots of photos and things like that. But what I do want to talk about and think about tonight is the theme of pilgrimage. And this talk was really inspired by a leaflet that I picked up a couple of weeks ago when I was doing the Portuguese Camino. And I picked up this leaflet in a church, and I thought, oh, this would make a great basis for a short talk in church. So that's what we have here tonight. So I want to think, first of all, about pilgrimage, because pilgrimage has always been hugely important within not only the Christian faith, but actually the Jewish faith as well. We know, for example, that Jesus himself went on numerous pilgrimages, mainly to Jerusalem. And especially to Jerusalem for the Passover festival, where it was expected all Jews would go to worship the Lord in Jerusalem. And the first reading that we've just heard, Psalm 121, is known as a song of ascent. So in the Bible, it's titled Song of Ascent. And it's one of a group of psalms that the pilgrims would have sang as they made their way to Jerusalem. These are pilgrim songs. So you can imagine the pilgrims are making their way to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is around 3,000 feet high. So often, whichever direction you're approaching Jerusalem, you will be sort of going up the hill. And as the pilgrims are making their way to Jerusalem, to the temple, they'll be singing, I lift my eyes up to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And when you read Psalm 121 and realize this is a song the pilgrims would have sang as they made their journey to Jerusalem, it makes a lot more sense, the words, and where it talks about, the sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon at night, you shall not let your foot stumble, and so forth. And there's a group of songs, psalms, that were used by the pilgrims as they made their way to Jerusalem. And the reading from Jeremiah, chapter 6, verse 16, also talks about looking for those ancient ways, those ancient paths. And when we're thinking about ancient pilgrimage routes such as the Camino de Santiago, that seems a very appropriate passage. I rather like this quote from Pope Benedict XVI. This is what he said about pilgrimage. He said, "To go on pilgrimage is not simply to visit a place to admire its treasures of nature, art, or history. To go on pilgrimage really means to step out of ourselves in order to encounter where God has been revealed, where his grace has shone with particular splendor and produced rich fruits of conversion and holiness among those who believe." And there are many pilgrim locations all around Europe and all around the world that are important to Christians. Here in Britain, many of our cathedrals were important centres of pilgrimage. Think particularly about Durham Cathedral and the tomb of St. Cuthbert. Pilgrims would travel to Durham to pay their respects at St. Cuthbert's tomb, and you can visit St. Cuthbert's tomb to this day in Durham Cathedral. But the three main centres of Christian pilgrimage were obviously Jerusalem. This was obviously the main place of pilgrimage for Christians, Rome, but also Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Now, some of you will be familiar with the Camino de Santiago, maybe one or two of you less so familiar. So just to explain what it is briefly and a little bit of a history of why Santiago de Compostela in Spain has become such an important centre for Christian pilgrims. So the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James in English, is a series of pilgrim routes all across Europe that converge on Santiago de Compostela. Now, you might not be able to see terribly clearly the screen because it's so bright this evening, but you can see the bottom bit of France there, and Spain and Portugal, with a lot of the main pilgrim routes in the Iberian Peninsula, all making their way to Santiago, which is in the northwest of Spain. And the reason this pilgrim route exists in the first place is because, according to Spanish legend, St. James the Apostle, one of the 12 disciples of Jesus, preached the gospel in Spain. And then when he returned to Judea, he was executed under the orders of King Herod Agrippa in 44 AD. And according to Spanish legend and tradition, the body of St. James the Apostle was brought back to Spain by his disciples on a boat led by angels. And he was buried in what is now Santiago. Excuse me. Now, his body was discovered by a shepherd in the 9th century. And King Alfonso II had a small chapel built over the site where the body of St. James the Apostle was found. And it became a very important place of pilgrimage from the medieval period onwards. In fact, it became one of the 3 top places of pilgrimage, as I said, Jerusalem, Rome, and then Santiago. Now, as you probably can tell, I'm a little bit skeptical about the fact that St. James the Apostle is buried in Spain. In my mind, it doesn't really make much sense. I would have imagined he would have been buried in Judea. Now, it might upset some people, but I suspect that what they did find was probably a tomb of some notable local Christian saint, and King Alfonso II maybe saw an opportunity to capitalize on this. But the Camino de Santiago became this really important pilgrimage location. But then from the 14th century onwards, due to religious wars, the Reformation and the plague, overall interest in the Camino died down, so that in 1985 there were only 1,245 pilgrims recorded that year alone. But since the 1990s, and particularly over the last 10, 15 years, the Camino has seen a huge resurgence in popularity. And it's partly due to the work of Father Elias Falnina. We've got a picture of him. Now, in the 1980s, Father Elias started to mark out these ancient pilgrim routes leading to Santiago. And he introduced the now famous yellow arrow, which we'll see in a moment, which guides and directs pilgrims to Santiago. Now, today, the Camino de Santiago is a very, very popular pilgrim route. Last year alone, 2023, there were 446,000 pilgrims to Santiago. Bear in mind, in 1985, there were only 1,245. Last year, there were 446,000 pilgrims, one of which was Julie. Now, for me, doing a pilgrimage route, it's not the destination that's important. It's the journey to get there. It's the people you meet on the way. It's the conversations you have. But it's also the challenges and adversities that you have to face and the lessons you learn as a result of it. Now, people do the Camino today for all sorts of reasons. Some do it for religious reasons. Some people do it because they just want space to reflect. And a lot of people do it because it's a physical challenge and they just like the idea of this long distance walk through Spain and Portugal and other countries. Now, as you know, I first did the Camino 2 years ago in 2022, where I walked around 1,000 kilometers from France all the way across to Finisterre and the western tip of Spain. And 2 weeks ago, I completed the Portuguese Camino, slightly more modest walk this time. It was from Porto to Santiago, and that was 272 kilometers, which took me 11 days to complete. But what I want to talk about tonight really is the 5 common symbols associated with the Camino, or 5 symbols that you might see associated with the Camino, and just to briefly reflect on what they might mean for each one of us here tonight. And the first one I've already mentioned is the yellow arrow. So if you walk the Camino route, wherever you go, you will see the yellow arrow. And the yellow arrow is what guides and directs the pilgrims on the right path. And whenever you see the yellow arrow, you know that you are on the right road. You are heading in the right direction. You are also reassured that someone has gone this way before you. In fact, it's often you're sort of pondering the fact that you are following in the footsteps of pilgrims who've walked that route for, hundreds and hundreds of years before you. Now, the Christian life itself is a pilgrimage. If we know and love Jesus, then we are on a pilgrimage through this life, ultimately to God in heaven. Now, there are times when you're following the Camino that sometimes you lose track of the yellow arrows. Sometimes you have to look around and try and see where the yellow arrows are. And although it's quite difficult to get lost on the Camino, it's not impossible. And there may be times when you miss the arrow and you keep on walking in the wrong direction, and you need to find your way back to the right path. And that can be true on life as well, that sometimes we lose our way, sometimes we take a wrong turning, either because we lose track of where we're meant to be heading, or maybe we deliberately choose to divert, to go onto a different path. So a question for us to ponder, and there are 5 little questions for us to ponder. And the first one is this, which is, what are we looking to guide us in life? Who or what do we look to in life to point the way? Obviously, for us as Christians, Jesus should be the one that directs us and points the way. But maybe a question we can ponder and ask ourselves is Jesus really the one who is directing us? Are we really seeking his will for our lives? Or do we seek guidance and direction from other things or other people? Maybe, there's not always necessarily a bad thing to seek guidance from other people, but, are we putting Jesus first? So we have the yellow arrow. The second symbol that you get on the Camino is the backpack. Now, when I walk the Camino, when Julie's walked the Camino as well, we've carried all our possessions, all our belongings in our rucksacks. And when you're doing a long distance walk, weight matters a lot. So on my first Camino, I spent a lot of time making sure I had the right equipment and making sure my bag wasn't too heavy. But when I did the walk the first time around, I still discovered that I was carrying too much stuff. My bag was weighed down by things that were unnecessary, surplus to requirement. And I ended up sending some of those things back home because I realized it was just weighing me down and these were unnecessary. When I did the first Camino, which was part of a sabbatical, I actually kept a diary, and this is what I wrote on day 18 of the walk. I said this: I've been reflecting on the struggles I've had with the burden I was carrying today, and how no matter of fiddling with the backpack, I couldn't correct it. And it made me think about all the burdens other people carry: ill health, disability, loneliness, isolation, singleness, unhappy marriages, financial worries, those trapped in unfulfilling jobs, unemployment. The list goes on. I took a moment to pray for these people. And I've been thinking also seriously about sending more items home to try and reduce the weight of my rucksack. I actually need very little for this pilgrimage. Again, there is something to ponder about the unnecessary things we carry with us through life. What might I be asked to lay down? The words of Jesus are apt. Are you tired, worn out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and lightly. And one of the lessons you learn on the Camino is how little you really need. It's surprising on, how you can survive even for a month doing a walk with very few things. And one of the things a lot of people do, particularly on the Camino Francis route, is they will carry with them a stone or a pebble from their place of origin. And about halfway or just over halfway along the route from France to Santiago, there is the Iron Cross. And for centuries, Christians have been laying down these rocks, these stones, at that Iron Cross. It's a symbol of laying down their burdens at the foot of the cross. And the backpack makes us ponder and think about what are the things that maybe we are carrying today in our lives that actually are unnecessary for us to carry. Are we carrying burdens that Jesus would choose us or ask us not to carry? You know, is Jesus inviting us to come to him and lay down some of those burdens? So again, a question to ponder. What can you take out of your backpack today to make your journey lighter? Is there anything excessive you are carrying with you for your journey through life, for your pilgrimage of life? And I'm not just talking about material possessions, although that might be it. Maybe we clutter up our lives with material possessions that we don't really need, that don't help us in any way. But it might be attitudes or values, or maybe unconfessed sin, or a lack of forgiveness for ourselves or for another. You know, what are the things we might be carrying in our backpacks that we need to lay down and hand back to Jesus? The third symbol of the Camino is bandages. Nobody is free from pain on the Camino. Everyone will feel some sort of physical pain on the journey, whether that be blisters or wounds or sprains or just aches and pains, because even if you're used to spending the day walking in the Lake District and going up and down mountains, there's something different about walking day after day for many days or even weeks on end. And it puts a toll on the body. And sooner or later, your body will pay the price. And you might have to go at a slower pace. You might have to travel a shorter distance, or you might even have to stop. Now, those of you that remember me talking about my last Camino 2 years ago will be glad to hear tonight that I haven't got any photos of my blisters. But if anyone's interested, I can show you them. But 2 years ago, I developed horrendous blisters, and I've shown them to other people. And people said, oh yeah, I've had blisters. No one's beaten my blisters. I don't think anyone's had blisters quite like mine. But as a result of that, I had to spend 4 days in one location as my feet healed. And those 4 days were a deeply frustrating and difficult time for me, because I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to continue with the walk. And more recently, on my last Camino, I met up with a friend from America, and unfortunately one day he decided to drink from a fountain that he thought was safe to drink from, and as a result of that he became very ill indeed. So much so that he had to give up the Camino completely. He wasn't able to complete the walk because he was so ill. And again, he had to spend a few days in one location and then eventually see a doctor. So things can happen on the Camino that cause you to stop. I met another chap from Denmark who injured his shin very badly, and I met up with him later on, but you know, each step for him was really painful and really difficult, and he could only do short distances each day because of the pain he was in. But the pain reminds us sometimes of how difficult the journey is, and the pain can actually shape us and remold us. Actually, I would say that my 4 days experience of having to stop on the Camino caused me to reevaluate a lot of things. And my friend Billy, when he was ill on the most recent Camino, he was saying to me that it taught him a big dose of humility, because this was his 3rd year of doing the Camino, and he'd done the Camino with me 2 years ago. He did another route last year, an even more demanding route. So he thought this one would be an easy one, a doddle. And it wasn't, it was hard. And he said, I've been taught an important lesson about humility. But the point is about this is that as we journey through life, we will also pick up injuries and wounds along the way. So the question again, another question for us to ponder is, what life wounds might you have to deal with? And how do you face the pains and the difficulties of life? Maybe tonight you feel like you're limping along because of some wound in your life. It might be a physical issue. It might be some emotional or spiritual issue that you're wrestling with. It might be something someone said to you, maybe even many, many years ago, but it causes you to walk with a limp. And maybe a question for us to think about tonight is, are there any wounds that Jesus would like to heal? The fourth illustration of the Camino, and there's 5 altogether, so we're nearing the end, is the walking stick. I find that using walking sticks really makes a big difference. I was always very judgmental about people in the Lake District when I saw them with their walking sticks, and I always thought they looked so silly with those sticks. I always thought they looked like they were skiing, but without the skis. And then I discovered that actually walking sticks are really helpful and useful, and I'm a big fan of them, and I use them all the time, because when you're walking a long way, especially when you're going up and down, when you're carrying a heavy burden on your back, they help spread the burden, and they help you travel more easily. And one of the things that makes the Camino so special are the people that you meet on the way. I'm sure Julie found this, but there's something about when you walk with people, you share at a very deep level in a way that you wouldn't normally share in everyday life. I've had conversations with strangers on a much, much deeper level than I've had with friends I've known most of my life. And that's one of the beauties of the Camino. And one of the things that I find on the Camino is that often the journey, the miles, the kilometers that you'll be walking, disappear very quickly and easily because you're engaged in conversation with people on the way. And often you'll get to your destination and think, oh, are we here already? That was so quick, because you had someone to share the journey with. And the other beauty about having people there is because they're the people that can encourage you. So when you're feeling tired or weary, or you need a bit of a helping hand, there's a lot of people around you, other fellow pilgrims, who will do that for you. There's something really beautiful where fellow pilgrims will look out for one another. And so you could say that these people are like walking sticks. They help us on our journey. So another question for us to ponder. Would you like to put that up, please, Adam? Who are the people who serve as walking sticks in your life journey? Who are the people who help you and support you? And what would it look like for you to be a walking stick for others? What might you be able to do to help support and encourage other people? It might be a neighbor, a family friend, someone in church. But how can we be a blessing and encouragement to others? And the final symbol of the Camino that I want to talk about tonight, and a really important one that's associated with the Camino, is the scallop shell. And you'll often see people carrying a scallop shell like that one on this picture on their backpacks, or sometimes even on their hats. And the reason for this is because many, many years ago, when pilgrims started going to Santiago, often they would go beyond Santiago to the coast at Finisterre or Murcia, and they would pick up a scallop shell from the beach, and then they would carry that back with them, back to wherever they came from, because of course most pilgrims today will fly out, walk to Santiago, and then fly home. But obviously in the medieval periods, once you got to Santiago, you still had to make the journey back. So these scallop shells were a sign that these were pilgrims and that they had completed the pilgrimage. Now the shell, if you look at it from above, can also look a little bit like a hand. And it can help us to think a little bit about the hands of Jesus. You think of that wonderful poem by Teresa of Avila, who says, Jesus has no hands but ours, no feet but ours in the world. And so the Camino, the scallop shell, which is the symbol of the Camino, a symbol of pilgrimage, can help us to think about who are the people that maybe we can reach out to and to serve and to love and to bless. Says there, in our pilgrimage of life, in what ways can we reach out and bless and help others? And what steps do you need to take to be a true pilgrim in life? Because we are all pilgrims. We are all on a journey of faith. Now, before the followers of Jesus were called Christians, they were known as the people of the way. The people of the way. And I really like that. And the whole idea of a pilgrimage is that you don't stay in one place for long. You keep moving. And that's one of the things I love about the Camino de Santiago, that each day you're getting up and you're heading to a new destination, a new location, and you don't know what you will discover on the way. You don't know who you will meet. And that's the beauty of the Camino. I do wonder, though, sometimes if in the Christian life we stop journeying. I wonder if sometimes in the Christian life we become too comfortable about where we are. And maybe one of the challenges for us to think about personally is, have we stopped journeying with Jesus because we've found a place where we're comfortable and we don't want to move on from that place? Pilgrims are always moving on. So what might that look like for us? Now, I'm not talking about the physical moving location or things like that, but you might know in your own Christian life that maybe you've got to a place where you feel like maybe you're stuck, maybe a place where you're not growing, maybe a place where you're sort of retreating. And actually, could there be a challenge for us to think afresh about what it means to be a pilgrim, to follow Jesus in the world today? I want to just read this little reflection as a way of drawing this talk to a close. And again, it was on a leaflet I picked up on my most recent trip to Portugal. And it said this: "One day a young man arrived at a monastery searching for an elderly pilgrim who was known to be the wisest of them all. In spite of his youth, this young man had already completed the majority of the well-known pilgrimages of the world. He approached the wise man and asked, 'Master, what must I do to become a true pilgrim?' The elderly man looked into his eyes, and he felt great compassion for him. 'Son, if you truly wish to be an authentic pilgrim, return to your home with your family, your neighbors, and your friends, and listen to them, serve them, forgive them, and love them. Then you will be a true pilgrim.'"